Welcome to episode 15 of WooWoo for the Skeptic. I'm Kim Pullender, your host and curiosity advocate for the world of metaphysics. Today, we're going to be looking at the effects of something called bilateral stimulation. Does utilizing the left and right sides of your body really cause a change in brain chemistry? Can it be a shortcut to uncover your emotional memories? And how could it enhance your meditation? All of these questions and more in today's episode. I had first-hand experience as a client with today's guest, Rick Reynolds. I went on a spiritual retreat in Sedona, and Rick was assigned as one of my practitioners. At the time, I had little experience in talking about my feelings, let alone knowing what they even were. I was blown away by Rick's process because I was able to immediately access an early memory from my childhood that turned out to be pivotal in my emotional healing. I will always be an IT nerd at heart, and I was very intrigued by the headphones and handheld devices that were used in Rick's process. This week, I finally got the chance to find out what exactly was going on with those techie toys. So please enjoy. I'm very pleased to be welcoming Rick Reynolds today. He is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, a Reiki Master, and a life coach. He is a core belief transformational specialist because shifting those core beliefs is the most powerful life-changing work that he does. Hypnotherapy, Reiki, EFT, life coaching, and bilateral stimulation are all modalities that Rick incorporates. So Rick, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me here. I'd love to have the opportunity to share healing modalities and hopefully help someone have a shift today as a result of what they hear.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, before we get into the bilateral stimulation stuff that I'm eager to talk about, how did you get into energy work?
My grandmother was a Reiki Master. You know, how many people could say that, right? So I do a lot of my work with people on her Reiki table here in my office. I'll pull it out depending on the situation and the person I'm working with, and do run Reiki in the background of what I do. And it's kind of neat to be using grandma's table. I can feel her presence, in the room. This is the table that she did Reiki on all those years ago. And she learned Reiki back in the early 70s, late 60s, where it was a big thing everywhere when it cost a lot of money and nobody knew just what it was. And I just kind of grew up with that. When you have something hurts, grandma puts her hands on it and it feels better. And then I was working in TV news and she passed and I inherited her table. And after a trip to beautiful Sedona, Arizona, where I live now, I really got in touch with how much I was done with telling the stories of what's wrong with the world every day and scaring people, and how it was really time to shift to helping people heal instead of scaring them, and went home and changed my whole life and became a hypnotherapist, and then incorporated the Reiki and learned energy psychology tools and combined it all, developed some of my own techniques, and it's been an incredible journey.
Wow, that's amazing that your grandmother was a Reiki Master. I mean, that's so unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I met you when I did a spiritual retreat, and you used a method with me called bilateral stimulation. So I wanted to talk about that first. Can you explain what that is?
So the concept of bilateral stimulation is pretty interesting. I use a bilateral stimulation device, or when working with people on the phone, have them bilaterally stimulate themselves. And what this is, it's just, my device calls attention from one side of the body to the other. You were wearing a headset that sent a tone to your left ear, and you were holding tappers that at the same time the tone hit your left ear, vibrated your left hand, then crossed over to your right hand. And so it creates this back and forth, side to side. And what that actually does is slow down the left hemisphere of the brain and speed up the right. Our left brain, our linear analytical brain, runs really fast. Our thoughts can race. And our emotional brain kind of plods along at a really slow pace. And what this device does, or any form of bilateral stimulation, is bring the two hemispheres into alignment, get them running at the same speed. Now, if you've ever gone for a walk or a run or ridden a bike or rowing a boat, all these are bilateral stimulation. And you may have noticed while you're doing that it clears your mind and it softens your emotional state. We tell each other when we are upset about something, if I'm really angry, someone might say to me, why don't you just go for a walk? Or struggling to make a decision, and just my mind's racing, someone will say, get out of here, walk around the block, then decide. Why do we tell each other that? It turns out the science behind it is that by walking, by doing anything that stimulates the right brain, left brain, right brain, left brain, we bring the two hemispheres of our brain into balance, can clear our minds, soften our emotional state. And in that state, magic can happen. Our creative brain can talk to our linear logical brain, and new ideas kind of show up. And it really opens up a pathway of self-discovery and healing. So I use this with you, and I use this with clients to shift a core belief, to get someone in this state of bilateral stimulation, and then do what you can't do when you go for a walk or run, and that's close your eyes. And the second the client closes their eyes, they've changed their brainwaves. You drop instantly out of any fight or flight response and begin entering an altered or an expanded state of consciousness. Then it's possible to say, okay, what stands in the way of you and the belief that you want?
So the headphones and the things in your hand that vibrate back and forth. So it's going back and forth at, within a few seconds, the intervals. So are you saying that the left brain typically is going much faster than the right brain?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If we are able to measure the speed, one is cycling really fast and one really slow. It's like having two computers running different operating systems and running at different speeds. And if we can slow down one computer and speed up the other, then there's more connections between the two, and we can actually get the program that's running on your linear brain to run on your emotional brain. So I sometimes tell people, what we're going to do is install this belief on your Mac. It's running on your PC. And we just need to get it installed on the other computer. As you can think, we all have these things that we want to be true, that we tell ourselves are true, but don't resonate emotionally. And that's where my work is really good. It's like, so many people know they're supposed to love themselves. They should love themselves, that if they love themselves fully and completely, they'd feel better about their life. They'd be in a much happier state. Their relationships would be better. So, you ask them, do you love themselves? And they say, sure, of course I do. Yet they look in the mirror and say, I love me. And it feels like a lie that has no emotional truth whatsoever. And that's the divide. We work in that space between the two brains. You've got it installed on the PC, the I Love Myself program, but it's not running at all on your Mac.
Yes, that's so true. And I was curious, so if you put someone on a treadmill, had them start walking and close their eyes and then start doing your process, would that be as effective? Like, what is it about the headphones? Is there something about audio and tactile that makes this more effective when you use those two?
Well, it doesn't matter what stimulus you use, it will be effective. So you could have someone on a treadmill. It's also done with light bars, with your eyes open, watching a light go back and forth from right to left. However, that has the eyes open. It's not as deep a state as when you close your eyes, you change the brain waves. So I like to use the sound and the vibration. Some people are more auditory, some people are more kinesthetic, tune more into the vibration. And the two seem to combine to hit most of the population and really help them into this different state of consciousness. It's not all that dissimilar from the classic hypnosis induction of watch the pocket watch going back and forth. Left, right, left, you're getting sleepy. It is a right, left is an induction. And it does open you to a greater state of suggestion. People do become more suggestible in this state, which means I take a very serious role in only laying out suggestions that are positive for the client's highest and greatest good, and usually things that we've talked about headed into the work. So, I'm aware of that, but I think part of the reason they have people march around in the military is because of that state of consciousness.
That's an interesting idea.
Soldiers get out there, right, left, and then they start a cadence and they start shouting out and barking things. We are do, and that's a programming that is happening through that process.
So then at the point that now you have the mind, the left brain that has slowed down, you're more open to suggestion, you have a better connection to memories of the childhood?
Yeah, that what happens is that when you speed up the emotional brain, emotions begin to sift and move through us gently and easily, and they're not as painful. It's a softening of that emotional state. And it's usually the emotional brain that is holding on to the memory. It has the greater memory than the intellectual brain. So and it's that place where we've made the false assumption about the world and how things are. And just by simply asking what stops you from fully loving yourself, or what keeps you from knowing at your core that you're enough, or that you're worthy, or that you're deserving, whatever the belief is that we're working on, will just those few words begin to open file folders in the brain of topics and ideas. And sometimes the client will say, because of everything my father ever said to me. Like, that's a big folder, right? And I'm like, okay, good. We're looking through that folder of all the things your father ever said to you. I want you to look through these, and what we're looking for is the worst or the first. And that suggestion allows memories to start popping, and the client will share a memory, and we get back fully engaged in the memory so that we can have some healing and shift the view of what really happened. We all make assumptions about ourselves and the world when we are children, and rarely go back and re-examine it. Maybe it'd be helpful if I gave you an example of something that happened in a session. So I'm working with a woman, and her issue is she doesn't believe that she's lovable, and she doesn't think that she is enough. Like, these are core wounds. The core belief running inside of her is there's something wrong with me. As I'm describing the work, she's like, I had great parents. There's no trauma. There's no drama in my background. I don't know where this will possibly go. I'm like, okay, well, it's really important to just share whatever comes up. She puts the device on. We're going right, left, right, left, right, left. I say, just feel how much the part that feels true to this: I love myself, I'm lovable, I am worthy, I am enough. And she feels that. Now feel into where that isn't true. Okay, she's feeling that. Now I want you to go back to a first or worst moment in your life where that wasn't true. And there's a long silence, and then she says, no, this is stupid. I'm like, what is it? What's coming up? Nothing is stupid. Share with me, what's the memory? She said, okay, my grandfather is scooping ice cream cones for all the grandkids. And I'm 5 years old. And when he gets to me, he puts mine in a cup. I said, oh, that's interesting. Just stay with that. Be that 5-year-old. What does that feel like? The tears just start flooding out. And she's like, it hurts. Oh, what's the little girl thinking? What has she decided is true because of this? And it all comes out. I'm the littlest. I always make a mess. I can't be trusted to have mine on a cone. I'm not as good as everyone else. They don't love me as much as all the other kids. There's something wrong with me. Okay, that's the core, right? That's the issue she's here for. So stay with that. Where do you feel it in your body? And she's like, oh, I feel it all right in my chest. And so I have her just really experience it, to fully get the experience, to be that 5-year-old, to be back in the past. And then I pull her up outside of her body and look down at the scene and ask her simply, what can you see that the child can't? There's a long pause. And she goes, no. Like, what is it? What are you saying? 54 years of thinking I wasn't lovable and not worthy and not enough. All because my grandfather ran out of cones. There's an empty box of ice cream cones sitting there on the counter. Okay. So then I have her step back into the scene to show up where the little girl has got her ice cream in the cup and is feeling horrible inside of her and has all that awful feeling in her chest, and appear before her like an angel from the future. And she does, and she puts the little girl on her lap, and she's hugging her, and she's letting her know how lovable she is. And then she says to her, Grandpa just ran out of cones, and shows her the empty box. And the little girl looks at her and says, but why was mine in the cup? I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. Like, oh, she's really attached to that idea. It's not going to shift that easily. Like, okay, Grandpa ran out of cones, but I still got mine. Everybody else got the cone, and I was the one that didn't because I make a mess because I'm not responsible. So we did what I do with almost everybody. We probably did this. I bring in a future self, a version of her that loved herself completely, that knew she was lovable, that knew that she was worthy, that absolutely knew beyond any doubt that she was enough, and that could look back at every moment in her life with a sense of total gratitude, grateful for everything that happened because it's made her who she is, and acknowledging all the blessings of it. And that I invite that future self to come in and comfort the adult and the child that the adult is holding. That so the 5-year-old, the 54-year-old are all right there. And this future her shows up with a smile on her face, very lighthearted, almost laughing, and says, oh, come on, your grandfather would be beside himself if he thought you'd suffered all these years because he didn't count cones. You know, if he'd counted the cones first, everybody would have had theirs in a mug, or your brother would have had his in the mug because he hates ice cream cones. And with that, the future version of her reaches into the trash can and pulls out the cone without the ice cream on it that the brother had thrown away. And the little girl just looks at it. You could just feel the scene and just begins to laugh. And goes, of course, Grandpa just doesn't count. Right. I am lovable. I am enough. I am worthy. Right. You know, and it all shifted. It was like that was the linchpin. I often think of these sessions as a Jenga pile. If you've ever played the game Jenga, where you've got these bricks all stacked on top of each other. And these are the events that happen in our lives that lead us to the false belief. And that false belief is the tower. And if we pull from the bottom of the stack or pull a real big brick out of the middle, the whole thing comes falling apart. And that's kind of what happened. We pulled this out and then went back to how true are these beliefs, and they were rock solid at that point. And that was all that was needed. Her whole life shifted. And sometimes it happens like that. Sometimes we need to, okay, that's one example. Now let's find another. And we pull out another brick, go back to another moment in time, look at that, shift it, turn it around until we've gone through enough things that the miracle can happen. So it's really a part of ourself speaks the truth to the rest of us, and the truth sets us free. Because the truth is, of course, she's lovable. Of course, she's worthy. Of course, she's enough. And she knows that on a soul level, she knows that. Intellectually, she knows that. But there was this 5-year-old part of her that wasn't believing it.
Yeah. And it's so interesting how that bilateral stimulation does, like you said, just take you immediately where you need to go. Like for her, she would have never in a million years dreamt that that was relevant to the situation, but it's where she went. And for me, I think you had asked me when's the first time that I felt, I can't remember what it was, just being alone or whatever. And my mind immediately went to a situation on the second grade playground. And I would have never thought that that was relevant. And it was a really interesting process for my left brain to kind of observe while this was all going on, through the crying, the tears, how this was unfolding. And I really liked the process where I can't remember how it exactly came about, but at some point we brought my mother in to sit next to me on the playground as a second grader. And to see her as that little girl was really powerful for me.
Yeah, well, I use a whole bunch of different hypnotic technique in this, so it's different with everybody, but I will do a reparenting regression in some form or another with lots of clients, because really these core belief issues come to us. The first way they come in is through our parents. Our parents believe something about themselves and about the world. Often the negative belief we're trying to shift belonged to someone before it belonged to us. So your mother or your father is believing that they're not worthy, not lovable, not enough, whatever, that there's something wrong with them. And when you're a toddler, you slip your feet into their shoes. You pretend to be your mother and your father. And you don't just walk around in their shoes. You move your hands the same way they move. You use the words that they use. You tilt your head like your parent tilts their head. And you begin seeing the world through their beliefs. And if you have a mother or father that can't love themselves, thinks that they're not worthy, they're inadequate, they're not enough, one of these core wounds because of something they went through in their life, you've tried that on, even though you've never experienced their wounds. When you look through a filter of a belief, everything that's true about that is highlighted. Everything that's not true slips to the background. It's kind of hard to see. So, you begin looking through that, and then things happen. The child spills milk and thinks that they're inadequate, that's proof, instead of saying all kids spill milk. That's just what toddlers do. That's why we have sippy cups. So we get this warped perception of reality that comes through the parent. So I will take someone in session at some point where something has come up involving a parent and have them take a photograph of the parent in the situation, sprinkle magic dust on the photo, and watch that parent go all the way back to being a child themselves, all the way back to being a toddler. And then it's like, what didn't your mother or father get that they really needed when they were a little kid? And usually it's unconditional love and attention. So we bring in two ideal parents, an ideal mother, an ideal father, two enlightened beings to be parents for your parent. And we see them pick up the toddler and just fill her with absolute unconditional love and kiss her from the bottom of her feet to the top of her head and just love everything about her, love how her mind works, love how she looks, love every feeling that she has. This is really important, that the parent accept all feelings in the child, love the child when the child is happy, and love the child when the child is sad or angry, and teaches them to just have their feelings rather than trying to fix it. Because that feeling is healing. So if this is the way your parent was raised, they'd really be different. And then usually I have them raised with some sort of the core belief my client is working on. So if they're having trouble loving themselves, I may take them through an imaginary exercise of learning to love their bodies, sitting on their mother's lap with their father by their side, all of them looking in a mirror, and they say, look into the mirror. The mother begins looking in her own eyes, saying, I have beautiful eyes. I love my eyes. And the father looks in the mother's eyes and says, you do, you have beautiful eyes. I love your eyes. And the little girl looks up at her mommy and says, oh, you have pretty eyes. I love your eyes. And the little girl gets all excited, looks at her own eyes in the mirror and says, I love my eyes. I just have the client imagine them doing this with every part of the body so that the parent really loves themselves physically. And this is good for people that have weight issues or just feel totally uncomfortable in their own body. They picked it up usually from one or the other of their parents. and we can heal that little scene. Or what they're really needing in the core is to get the notion that there are no mistakes. So in this particular family, the enlightened beings believe that there are never any mistakes. So I'll do a variety of these different things, whatever the healing is needed, and then I have the parent grow up. Having had all these things happen to them, we now have a version of the parent that was raised by an enlightened being whose heart is open, who's able to comfort the child in a different way. So we may have done something like that with you, and bringing your mother as a child to the playground, or some sort of piece like that was very healing, creating an imaginary scene of some healed piece.
Yeah, and I like your idea of healing as feeling, because I think before going into that session, I would have been able to say with my left brain at full force that, oh, yeah, my mother was raised with a controlling mother, and that's why she controlled me. So, but being in that state with the bilateral stimulation, I think it allowed me to really feel for her, like get to that deep feeling of empathy for her, to see her on that playground as this controlled, dejected, really fearful child. Really made a difference. And I think that's what that stimulation does, or what it did for me, was really connect you to them in that way, on such an emotional level.
Yeah, we begin getting that our parents were just injured children too. Like, oh, we were injured children, raised by injured children, raised by injured children. This comes from generation to generation. Nobody's to blame here. They just did the best they could they didn't know how to speak that language, I will then bring in the adult version of the enlightened parent raised by enlightened beings to help the client heal and tell them what they need to hear. And usually it's like, even though our relationship was rough, even though there were these horrific moments, beneath it all was love. And I think, what people sometimes mistake the opposite of love to be anger, to be hate. And the opposite of love is indifference. And very seldom do I find true indifference in these sessions. I find a parent behaving badly, but they're engaged. They're doing the best they can with some faulty tools to help the child, what they think is helping the child, and they're hurting the child, but it doesn't come from. It's still love. It's not the absence of it. So reconnecting the truth of unconditional love to the client causes a shift, a change. So the future self comes in and speaks unconditional love. The you from today speaks unconditional love into you. And then a healed version of the parent might come in and speak this truth of unconditional love.
So raising them with enlightened parents is kind of how you program the MAC portion of the brain, where this then rewrites their history.
Right. This is putting in a new program, creating some new neural pathways that a new thought patterns can take place. It's like awakening people. And it's new, but it's not new. In my view, on a soul level, we know these things to be true. If you look at a newborn, they love themselves. They love the world. There's no awareness that there's something wrong with me, or I'm not enough, or I'm not worthy. It's like in that moment, they know who they are. They're okay with themselves, with the world. They're even okay with dying. It's like, okay, whatever, go back to wherever I came from. Not an issue. There's a fearlessness about us when we enter the world. And it's like I'm not creating a whole new program inside someone. I'm just awakening the master program, what was in there before we started pretending to be our parents and taking on these false views of the world.
So have you found that you work with specific themes with clients, or what are the types of clients that you work with?
So I think that there are some core issues that at least everyone that's sitting before me is dealing with some aspect of these major things. It's I'm not lovable, or maybe I'm not lovable. I can't love myself. So that's the whole self-love genre. And then there's I'm not enough, that core inadequacy. Something's wrong with me. And these two things are linked. It's like I'm not enough, therefore I'm not lovable. So I usually sit with people and ask them, sometimes the core is obvious and I can tell from why they're here and why they've come on a soul adventure, what to work on. But sometimes it's not so obvious. So I'll have them just simply rate these core beliefs, with 0 being no truth and 10 being completely true. How true is the statement, I am lovable? How true is the statement, I love myself? How true is the statement, I am enough? I am worthy? I am deserving? If all those seem to be really true, and often people will say, oh, they're a 10. They're a 10, with 0 being no truth, 10 being completely true, even though that's just their logical mind. I'm like, well, if all this is true, then why are you getting in these awful relationships? And why aren't you happy? Wait a second here. Oh, because people will answer from the left brain and not engage the right. So I have to get them, no, how true does this feel? Oh, well, it doesn't feel true at all. Okay, there's our divide.
Do you ever use like muscle testing to help clients see if it's true or not?
I don't, but that would be a valuable technique and another way to do this. But usually just by, presenting the idea of the emotional versus the intellectual truth, I can get them to cop to what's going on. And if they've come to me, they're in a state already that they know life isn't just wonderful. If I'm working with someone who's just raised their hand and volunteered in an audience or something, and it isn't there because they have an issue, then they're not willing to take a look at themselves and to go there. And we'll be like, they give me the answer they think they're supposed to have. Especially here in Sedona, we're all supposed to be enlightened. We're all, oh yes, I love myself 100%. I'm a 10. Oh yes, of course. Because they know. And so I'll shift to higher levels of belief. Okay, that's fine. Let's assume all that is true. Let's try some spiritual beliefs that there are no mistakes. Everything, no matter how it appears, is for the growth of all souls. How true is that? And they'll be, oh, well, that's an 8. And I'll say, okay. And if there are no mistakes, then I can't make one. Okay, try it on that statement. And they're like, oh, wait, no, that's not true. Like people are willing to say, there are no mistakes. Everything's according to God's plan. And then I add in but I can't make one. And they're like, wait, no, I can make mistakes. Like there's a conflict there. There's either there are no mistakes or there are mistakes. Then we go back to where do they think that they made a mistake? And it goes back to those regrets and those moments, and the same healing process happens. And there's really, underneath that begins popping up bits of I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough. This is just another way in for people that think they've already tackled all that. And we're like, okay, there's still some more.
Have you ever worked with clients with phobias? Because if we're talking about a process that can take you back to the first time or the worst time, is this effective with phobias?
Absolutely. So I've done the same process with people that have had fears of heights, fear of claustrophobia, and gone back to the brother holding the sleeping bag closed and the little girl trapped inside, can't get out, and that's the source. And the core belief is around not being safe. And if I can get them to, usually the ultimate belief that eliminates fears is who I really am is safe no matter what happens. When that is completely true, there's never any reason to be afraid. And that's a hard one for some people to get to, and we have to talk more about the who I really am business. Let's move beyond being our bodies, being our mind. There's a part of us that's greater than all of that. And when we can tap into that's who we really are, then if you can hold that belief, then there's nothing to ever really fear.
Yeah, and kind of related to that would be anxiety. Have you ever worked with clients with anxiety?
Yes. I think almost everybody, those that are really, really anxious, one of the things is they're unwilling or they're really stuck in the fight or flight response in their body. So I will say, close your eyes for the process. They'll close their eyes for 10 seconds, then their eyes pop open as they begin telling me what happened in the past.
Do you ever get taken to past lives? When you say go back to the first time, do they ever go to a different life?
Yeah, people whose belief system allows for that will go back to that. Some people who like to work in that level and will jump back there all the time. So sometimes it's kind of like a bypass. They don't really want to look at the stuff in this life, so they go to this. But it doesn't matter. It's okay. We can go back. We can relive a past life experience, and there's value in that. It is usually a metaphor for something that is occurring in this life as well. And healing that past life trauma is actually doing the same work. So it doesn't matter if it was really a past life or it's imaginary something or what it is. That's not important.
Well, why do you think it is that someone would be more willing to go to a past life versus this life?
Oh, I've had some people like that. Let's see. I've already healed everything in this life. I've done all that work already. It can't be that. It has to be something greater. So that's the belief that is running inside that takes us back to a past trauma, that it's got to be greater than this. So it would be like that first woman I was talking about who looks back at her childhood and says, there can't be anything here, and would dismiss the incident with the ice cream cone and figure it had to be a past life, and would go back and give me a good story, and we do a healing around that, and it would shift and it would produce the same results. It's sometimes just dismissing how easily we can misinterpret things, that doesn't have to be a big traumatic moment from our past that causes us to take on a false belief about ourselves or the world. These little things that seem so innocent, it's like, I think when I tell that story about the ice cream cone, parents freak out. They're like, you mean I can do everything right and my father could come in and give them an ice cream cone and a cup and they'd be damaged the rest of their life? And it's like, yeah, kind of the soul takes whatever experience they need to have the lessons they need to learn in this life.
Yeah, and I found that if they've had so many repetitive experiences or similar experiences, and they're kind of programmed for that, so where an ice cream cone would mean that deeper thing that they've been struggling with in multiple lives.
Yeah, the session I do often dovetails well with a session another practitioner does, with taking people through clearing all the karma, all the series of past lives, and doing that on a soul level,
that.
right? Oh, cool. The SRT,
Yes, that was amazing. Yeah. That was my first experience with any sort of past life regression session. It was, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple practitioners who are great at that piece. So they'll do that piece. And then the person comes, sees me, and it's like, okay, you've got this on the soul level. Now let's get it out of your neurological system from this lifetime. That's why I don't see a whole lot of past life jump back in this, because they're doing that in other sessions.
Yeah. Yeah. That was powerful. Do you know the history of bilateral stimulation, like how it first became popular?
Okay, so bilateral stimulation in use as a therapeutic tool traces back through a technique called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reparative therapy.
Oh, yeah. I'm doing an interview on that topic with someone. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so a woman named Francine Shapiro, she's a marriage family therapist from California, was walking through these fields in Monterey near her home and moving her eyes side to side and thinking about things in her life. And it popped her back through trauma and drama, and she worked it out and she felt better. She went, huh. I wonder what would happen if I have my clients look back and forth like this. And so she began waving her finger back and forth, side to side. And the client would go right back to these moments of trauma and drama, and she would help them release the trauma and drama around that. And she developed protocols for this and began training everybody in it, hypnotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, the world in this. And then it reached a point where she wanted to be taken more seriously and really have this adopted in the world of psychology. And they told her, well, then you should only train psychotherapists in this technique. So they stopped training hypnotherapists and others in how to do EMDR, focused only on licensed mental health professionals, and really helped them learn this skill with these protocols. So that was the first application in clinical psychology of bilateral stimulation. And that's where the device that I use was developed for EMDR therapists originally, and is considered an EMDR tool. Right-left stimulation goes back to the very beginnings of hypnosis and the swinging of the watch back and forth. And it is an induction technique. And in my training in hypnotherapy, my mentor was an EMDR therapist and I was familiar with EMDR, having my mother was an EMDR therapist, and when she discovered this technique as a marriage family therapist, she insisted my brother and I both go off and heal all of our stuff. So she paid for the therapy. She said, "This is profound. Go have 5 sessions. This could be life-changing." So I had that experience of healing my old wounds through this. Now, EMDR is primarily focused on trauma and drama. You rate how horrible the past event was and how it strongly it's impacting you, and you're trying to bring it down to a 0 from a 10. And they induce the state and then they stop it and you talk about it. Induce the state, stop it, and talk about it. So in hypnotherapy, we learn to use the device to just induce a hypnotic state. So that was a whole nother way of doing it. And I developed my own techniques after going through the hypnotherapy training, where I would leave the device on the entire time to create this state, use some hypnotic technique like the regression to the inner child, to the parent regressing to being a child, and the enlightened parent, and all these weaving in healing stories, and combining it with core belief work, because in my mind, that's the single most powerful thing I can do with someone is shift their core belief. When the belief changes, the whole perception of the world changes. Your story changes. The story you tell yourself. When you love yourself, it's a whole different experience. Someone who doesn't love themselves, that thinks there's something wrong with them, will wave at a friend. And if the friend doesn't wave back, the story begins, what did I do? What's wrong with me? And take in all the stress and anxiety comes up. We do this work. The person goes out in the world, waves at their friend. The friend doesn't wave back. It's like, what's up with my friend? hey, are you okay? The client then goes and investigates. Completely different emotional state, same situation in the world. So it's as though your beliefs really do create your experience of your reality. And when you shift those beliefs, everything changes. And in one session, I can create enough of a shift that a person's life can really begin to change.
Yeah. And that's what I experienced as well, is just having that session pushed me off in a specific direction or helped me. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on using bilateral stimulation during meditation, because I'm curious, because with the process, if it puts you in tune with feeling and tapping into your inner child, wouldn't it help facilitate that?
Absolutely. It absolutely does. And there's some modalities now and equipment out there that uses binaural beats. Those are a tone that right, left, and yet it's slightly different frequency, one side to the other, to create different brain waves to take you into theta state or these deep and interesting states of consciousness that can take years of doing regular meditation to ever achieve. So I think that just holding the tappers takes you into a very interesting and healing state, and could definitely be used with meditation or walking meditation. There's a reason why that exists in every culture and why it's so powerful. It's a form of bilateral stimulation and meditation at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say to skeptics who don't believe that bilateral stimulation is a thing?
I did go for a walk. Test it out. Just notice. I mean, is there really anybody that's never experienced some relief from an intense emotion by walking? I mean, it's just part of being human. I've yet to encounter a client in my office that says, no, I've never gone for a walk and felt better. No, I never went for a bike ride and suddenly felt better. That just doesn't happen to me. No, every single one. This is a core human experience. Whether you believe then you can heal from past traumas and change your beliefs and all that, that's a different thing. But the bilateral stimulation and its effectiveness, everybody has firsthand experience of that.
Yeah, or going for a run. So that whole left, right thing.
Right. People will tell you that they love that state that they get into when they run. That's bilateral stimulation.
Yeah, well, wonderful. Well, Rick, thank you so much for this interview. Can't wait to try more bilateral stimulation during meditation tonight. So that'll be fun.
And if you really want to get into it, you close your eyes and you move your eyes back and forth with the.
Oh.
And this is used in the military right now as a EMDR field technique. So when, let's say, a bomb has gone off and you're treating somebody, the soldiers will tap on each other's knees and move their eyes back and forth and be able to process the trauma as it's happening.
That's amazing.
Very, very powerful.
Yeah. All right. Well, before I let you go, would it be okay if I asked you some fun questions?
Sure.
Okay. Well, the first question is, did you have a favorite music group or singer growing up?
Oh my gosh, I liked so much music as a kid. My father was a rock and roll DJ.
Oh, wow. Did you ever get to meet any groups or anything like that?
I got to go. I got to go see Andy Gibb and the Bee Gees.
Oh, nice.
Free, my dad had tickets. That was the first concert that I went to, and my dad got to interview everybody. So, yeah, I'm 1 degree of separation from the Beatles, from Simon and Garfunkel, from the Rolling Stones, from all that 60s, early 70s music was a part of my growing up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my brothers used to listen to groups like Asia and Styx. Was that part of the 70s?
That's a little later.
Oh, is it later? Okay.
That's moving into the early 80s.
Okay. Maybe Peter Frampton? Was he part of 70s? I don't know.
Late 70s, mid 70s. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty cool that you had that connection
Yeah.
with music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Second question is, what was your crowning achievement in middle school besides meeting Andy Gibb? I don't know how old you were, but
Let's see. The middle school was a very intense time. It's surprising how many sessions pop back to middle school. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Well, I don't know if it's an achievement. It was both an embarrassing situation and an interesting situation. I wrote this poem, and my teacher thought it was so wonderful that I needed to write it really big, and we put it up in the classroom. The fellow students ridiculed me horribly for it. And it was just this, my best friend is myself. I love to walk and talk and play with myself. Well, the line play with myself.
Oh, yeah.
Different thing. Very insightful for, it was all about self-love and all the stuff that I work with people on right now. So it was really kind of cool. That and helping put together the yearbook.
Oh, very nice. That's a great accomplishment.
And I wrote a children's book.
In middle school?
In middle school, called It's Okay to Be Different, which is the story of a tomboy and a sissy and how they form this friendship and take on a school full of bullies that are picking on them.
Oh, wow.
And then it would be like decades later when I finally figure out that I was gay.
Yeah.
I look at that book and go, oh, wow, this is a little lesbian.
Yeah.
Little gay buddy here. So,
yeah, you just described all of my friendships in middle school. Right. So
wow, okay.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Is it published now? Or?
No. I sent it off in middle school. My teacher helped me send it to all the children's publishers, and I got some of the sweetest, most wonderful rejection letters. I haven't tried to publish it ever as an adult, but
maybe self-published. But yeah, what a great achievement for that age. Yeah, it's wonderful. And lastly, what's the number one thing on your bucket list?
I want to go to Peru. Sedona Soul Adventures does this, and go to Machu Picchu, and then go to Lake Titicaca with Don Miguel Luis and all these incredible people. Jorge Delgado is the incredible shaman. He brings in an ayahuascan shaman, and I just think that would be just a really interesting, incredible experience. So that's on my bucket list. Go to Peru and have an ayahuascan journey. Experience expanded, altered state of consciousness with a group of interesting people and the supervision of an experienced shaman.
All right. Well, Rick, thank you so much. Again, if listeners want to contact you for a session, you do remote sessions, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What's the best way to find you? Go
to my website. It's Trance Breakers, TranceBreakers.com. It's called that because I help people break free from the trance that they're already in. This work that I'm doing is unhypnotizing people. It's the opposite of hypnosis. It's breaking free from the negative self-talk and the stuff that we do. So TranceBreakers.com. There you'll find booking calendar, and you can just click on the buttons and find a time that works for you. And I love to do free fear-finding session with people. This is a half-hour session where they can feel in and see if I'm a good fit for them, and likewise, and we can figure out what the work should be that we do and then move forward from there.
For today's WooWoo News Corner, in 2012, Scientific American published an article on EMDR. Specifically, whether moving your eyes back and forth could help with anxiety. The article talked about 3 important questions. Number 1, does EMDR work better than nothing? The answer was yes. Question number 2, does EMDR work better than just supportive listening? And the answer was probably, and the article went on to give reasons why. And question number 3 was, does EMDR work better than standard cognitive behavior therapies? And the answer was no. The author went on to say, quote, not a shred of good evidence exists that EMDR is superior, unquote. However, in my own Google searches on EMDR for the episode this week, I did in fact find a lot of shreds of evidence that EMDR is maybe not superior, but at least effective for clients. I encourage you to find your own personal experience with it and then draw your own conclusions. Thank you for listening to WooWoo for the Skeptic. I would love to hear from you if you have ideas for a show or want to give feedback. And if you enjoyed this episode on bilateral stimulation, please share it with your friends. Also, I'm now taking donations to the show if you feel so compelled. This podcast is an act of love, and I so enjoy doing it week after week. I pay for the hosting sites and fees out of my own pocket, so if you feel like donating $5 or so to contribute to the operational costs, you can do so on the show's website. And I just want to say, I see how many of you are loyal listeners, and I get so much joy out of sharing my passions with you every week. I just really appreciate you inviting me into your personal space for our weekly fireside chats, so to speak. So thank you for that. And now for your moment of woo. This quote comes from L.R. Nost, and it says, life is amazing, and then it's awful, and then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and the awful, it's ordinary, mundane, and routine. Breathe in the amazing, hold on through the awful, and relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living the heartbreaking, soul-healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life. And it's breathtakingly beautiful. Have a great week, everyone.